On a remote island, far away from civilization, a woman named Jen is lying unconscious on the shore, wearing a life jacket. As she slowly regains consciousness, she notices her friend Brad lying nearby, also unconscious. Rushing to his side, she turns him over and is horrified to find a piece of coral lodged in his stomach. Desperately, Jen calls out for help, but no one answers. She removes her backpack and life vest, dragging Brad further up the beach. Jen carefully extracts the coral from his wound and uses her scarf to apply pressure. Determined to save him, she heads into the dense woods, finds a coconut, cracks it open with a rock, and quickly returns to Brad, only to discover he has already passed away. Grief-stricken, Jen holds his face, realizing she is now alone. The island where Jen and Brad are marooned is a narrow stretch of beach surrounded by thick forest. Overcome with sorrow, Jen wanders the island, eventually circling back to where Brad's body lies. Venturing into the jungle, she comes across a clearing with a bag hanging from a tree and a red cooler nearby. Hopeful, she calls out, but the island remains eerily silent. As she inspects the bag, she finds medicine dated from 1994, realizing that whoever left it behind is long since gone. Inside the cooler, she discovers some bottles of Coca-Cola, but she leaves them untouched. Continuing her search, she stumbles upon a thermos and a small metal box containing a deck of cards, some matches, and other small items. She also finds an old, abandoned tent covering a backpack filled with an old Game Boy, a car radio, a book, and a teddy bear. Returning to the beach, she hears a noise coming from a hollow tree and finds a tropical bird inside. Jen gathers leaves to cover Brad's body, gazing out at the desolate beach, surrounded only by sand and the vast ocean. As night falls, a torrential downpour forces Jen to seek shelter, huddling under some leaves with her jacket as her only protection. The following morning, she finds small fish washed up on the beach. As she gathers them, she comes across a dead shark, gruesomely split in half, with deep gashes covering its body. Puzzled and alarmed, Jen gazes out at the ocean, trying to imagine what could inflict such damage. Struggling to clean the fish with a flat stone, she eventually abandons the effort and returns to the cooler. Sifting through her belongings, she discovers that her diary has been ruined by the rain, with all the ink washed away. She finds a photograph of herself and her boyfriend, a bittersweet reminder of better times. Exploring further, Jen stumbles upon a burial site for 3 people, which sends a chill down her spine. She returns to the beach, only to find that Brad's body has started to decompose. Resolute, she drags him closer to the forest, digs a shallow grave, and buries him, marking the spot with a piece of wood bearing his initial. That night, Jen makes a rudimentary shelter and roasts fish for dinner, marking her first night alone on the deserted island. The next morning, Jen is walking along the beach, searching for more resources when she makes a chilling discovery. Brad's body has been removed from the grave, mutilated, and dragged away by some unknown force. Alarmed, she quickly sharpens a piece of wood into a makeshift spear, scanning her surroundings for any sign of danger, but nothing appears. As night falls, Jen remains on high alert, her nerves taut, expecting the return of whatever or whoever took Brad's body. But the night passes quietly, with no disturbances. The following day, Jen spots something floating in the distance and swims out to investigate, discovering a bucket and a suitcase. Diving deeper, she notices a dark hole in the ocean floor, but she retrieves the items and returns to the beach. There, she finds a pair of sneakers and some clothing. That night, her third on the island, she changes into the new clothes and sneakers, hoping to stay warmer. As she sits by the fire, she reopens the metal box and finds a hidden compartment containing some old photographs. Just as she's examining them, she hears the roar of a plane overhead. Rushing to get the flare, she fires it, but it fails to ignite. On her second attempt, it lights up, and she watches as the flare disappears into the horizon. Her hope turns to terror when she sees a humanoid creature rising from the water. Panicked, Jen retreats into the jungle, clutching her wooden weapon. She finds a hiding spot, her ears straining to catch the sound of rustling leaves and approaching footsteps. She remains hidden until the ominous presence of the monster fades, and she can breathe easier. The next morning, still shaken, Jen cautiously emerges from the hollow tree. She manages to catch a small shark using some fish as bait, and later that night, now the 5th night, she uses the shark as bait to lure the monster, hiding nearby with the shark in her line of sight. She watches anxiously, hoping the creature will take the shark and leave her alone. Jen closes her eyes momentarily, and when she opens them, the shark is already gone. The following morning, she notices the worn ropes from the trap, and, while sharpening her weapon, spots something in the distance, a body floating in the water. Upon closer inspection, she discovers it's a man, his body gruesomely cut in half with a mutilated face. Jen, undeterred, hangs the body as she did with the shark. On the 6th night, Jin watches from her hiding place as the monster takes down the hanging body and drags it into the ocean. She hears the distant hum of an airplane engine, but is still deciding what to do when she sees the monster's feet close by. Jin remains perfectly still, holding her breath until the creature finally moves away. The next morning, Jin improvises a net high up in the trees, hoping it will allow her to rest without being detected by the monster. That night, the 7th on the island, the weather takes a turn for the worse, with heavy thunderstorms rolling in. Jin hears the creature nearby, and, during a flash of lightning, spots it. Unfortunately, the monster sees her too. She quickly lies down in the net, but as the creature approaches, her fear nearly overwhelms her. The monster yanks the net, causing Jin to fall to the ground. Despite the fall, she manages to escape, grabbing her weapon and fleeing toward the beach. The monster leaps from the water, almost catching her, but Jin outruns it, forcing the creature back into the water. The beast attacks again, confronting Jin directly. She fights back with her weapon, but the monster hurls her aside. Before she can get up, it kicks her into the water. Jin searches frantically for the creature, but it has vanished. Injured and terrified, she retreats to the jungle and climbs a tree, hoping to recover. The next morning, Jin makes her way down to the beach to clean her wounds from the previous night's encounter with the monster. After changing into fresh clothes, she is shocked to see an inflatable raft with a tin approaching the island on the horizon. Disbelieving her luck, she swims out to the raft and discovers 2 other survivors from the shipwreck, her boyfriend Lucas Griffin and her friend Mia Reed. Overwhelmed with relief, Jin rushes into Lucas's arms, where he reassures her that everything will be okay now. Later, Jin prepares breakfast for Lucas and Mia, treating them to a 20-year-old soda she found. As they marvel at the island's beauty, Jin warns them about the hidden dangers lurking beneath the waters. Lucas, trying to soothe her, gently asks Jin to calm down and lovingly calls her dear. Jin, however, insists on telling them about the sea monster and the black hole in the ocean floor that pulls its victims into the depths. But when her friends remain skeptical, Jin mentions Zach, whose mutilated body was consumed by the monster, causing Lucas and Mia to exchange uneasy glances. Jin recounts in detail the terrifying experiences she endured over the past days, even showing them a photo of the deceased family, where the glowing eyes of the monster can be seen. Despite her efforts to convince them, Lucas and Mia remain doubtful. Mia, however, does believe that the graves of the family are somewhere on the island, but she wonders who could have buried them. They suggest that Jin calm down and wait for Brad or any other survivors to wash up on shore since the currents seem to bring everyone to this island. Jin sorrowfully informs Mia that Brad, her boyfriend, didn't survive the shipwreck and that the monster had taken his body underwater. Overwhelmed with grief, Mia walks away from her friends, struggling to process the loss. Later, as they sit alone on the beach, Mia gazes vacantly at the calm sea, confiding in Jin about how terrifying it was to be adrift in the vast ocean. She reveals how she counted each day as if it were her last, slowly losing her sanity in the eerie silence of the raft. Jin is convinced that it's safer to risk leaving on the raft and braving the ocean than to stay on the island and face the monster, but her friends don't share her view. Lucas, having had his own harrowing experiences in the past few days, is reluctant to venture back into the water. Nevertheless, Jin is determined to leave the island before nightfall. She suggests they sail westward, as that's the direction planes fly, which could lead them to civilization. She then asks Lucas for his pocket knife to gather as much food as possible before they depart. Upon opening the knife, Jin notices traces of red liquid and realizes that something horrific happened on the raft, and that Lucas and Mia might be hiding something from her. After spending the week gathering food by herself, Jin returns to find her friends looking oddly fatigued. They tell her they're too tired to swim again and believe that whatever monster might be on the island isn't more dangerous than being adrift in the open ocean. They suggest building a fire on the beach instead and waiting for a plane to spot them. Jin refuses to back down. She tries to persuade her friends to join her in the lifeboat and leave before nightfall, but Lucas loses his temper and flatly refuses. Realizing she can't rely on her friends, Jin decides to escape on her own. Once in the water, she concocts a clever plan. Waiting for the right moment when Lucas and Mia are distracted, Jin quietly gathers her supplies, places them in a container, and launches the inflatable raft into the water, making a bold attempt to flee without them. However, the couple notices and quickly gives chase. Jin fights to keep her lead, kicking Mia away several times, but Lucas eventually catches up, managing to throw her out of the raft. Mia then subdues Jin by striking her on the head with an oar. Jin regains consciousness in the darkness, realizing she's been tied to a tree to prevent another escape. Mia tells her that the island is safe, and that they haven't seen any monsters since night fell. Although Mia apologizes for striking her with the oar, Jin is too upset to listen and demands to be freed. Mia, however, refuses to believe Jin's tales of the sea monster, reminding her that she's deceived those close to her in the past, eroding their trust. Lucas soon joins them after a walk through the jungle, assuring them that he hasn't found any signs of the monster. But Jin, still uneasy, insists that the creature emerges from the water, not the jungle. Mia, wanting some space, decides to take a walk along the beach, where she is horrified to discover the mutilated remains of a fish in the sand. As they talk, Lucas initially tries to comfort Jin, but the conversation quickly takes a darker turn as he reveals his true feelings. He confesses that while he was enjoying himself on the yacht with their friends, Jin was never satisfied, always bringing negativity into his life. He accuses her of trying to ruin everything once again by insisting on leaving the island. Jin pleads with Lucas to release her, but he refuses, attempting to belittle her by reminding her that he has always supported her. Lucas believes that if Jin leaves the island without his help, she'll be helpless and become a burden to others. He chastises her for wanting to escape, claiming she'd leave him stranded with no food or hope of rescue. Jin tries to explain that the island has enough food, and the real danger lies in the bloodthirsty monster. Stung by Lucas's harsh words, Jin resolves to uncover the truth about what happened to Zack on the raft. Before Lucas can respond, they hear Mia's frantic scream as the monster attacks her. Grabbing a torch, Lucas rushes to her aid, leaving Jin tied to the tree. When he arrives, he finds the creature already devouring Mia. Desperate, Lucas strikes the monster with the torch, but it easily knocks him aside. Meanwhile, Jin manages to free herself and rushes to help, but it's too late. The monster drags Mia underwater as Lucas watches helplessly. When Jin reaches the scene, she pulls a stunned Lucas into the jungle, where they hide for the night. It's now the 9th day on the island. Lucas, paralyzed by fear, is reluctant to climb down from the tree, terrified that the monster might be lurking below. Jin tries to reassure him, reminding him that the creature has never been seen on the coast during daylight. Still, Lucas is haunted by the events of the previous night, and blames himself for Mia's death. To take Lucas's mind off his sorrow, Jin asks for his help in packing their belongings and gathering provisions so they can finally leave the cursed island. She spends her last matches cooking the fish she catches with a spear, and decides to make one final trip to the camp to collect any remaining items. As she holds the expired pill container, she reflects on the island's eerie silence. Eventually, Jin and Lucas load their gear onto the raft and set out into the water. Once aboard, Jin notices a disturbing sight. The raft is filled with a red liquid, likely Zack's blood. She glances at Lucas uneasily, unsure if she should confront him. Lucas begins rowing westward, hoping to be spotted by passing planes. However, he soon notices something moving beneath the water's surface. Moments later, the sea monster attacks, ambushing them in broad daylight. Panicking, Jin and Lucas barricade themselves inside the raft, shocked that the creature is attacking during the day. The monster tears through the bottom of the raft, trying to seize Jin, but she fights it off with her feet. Lucas fires several shots at the creature's head with his flare gun and pushes it back into the water with a spear. Water begins to flood the raft through the hole at the bottom. After a brief moment of calm, the sea monster suddenly drags Jin underwater in the bright daylight. The creature, a horrifying blend of shark and human, pulls her slowly toward a dark abyss on the ocean floor. Fighting her fear, Jin remembers the pocket knife she carries and uses it to wound the monster, which retreats, bleeding a black liquid. But then the creature turns its attention to Lucas, who dives in to rescue Jin. The monster quickly overpowers him, dragging him toward the dark hole despite his desperate attempts to fight back with a spear. Unable to save him, Jin surfaces and screams in despair, her last hope slipping away. With no other choice, she returns to the island, where the broken raft is eventually carried back by the current. Exhausted, Jin struggles to start a fire and writes a final message in her diary, recounting the terrifying events in her battle with the monster. She hopes her message will guide any future survivors if she cannot defeat the creature herself. Determined to end this once and for all, Jin prepares for a final showdown with the monster. She sharpens tree branches and crafts weapons from bones. When night falls, the creature emerges to hunt. Jin lures it into a trap, encircling it with dry sticks and grass before setting the trap ablaze. Confused by the flames, the monster tries to flee, giving Jin the opportunity to strike with her spear. She relentlessly attacks, grabbing more sharp sticks as the creature fights back, hurling her away. But Jin refuses to give up, repeatedly stabbing the monster with all her strength. In the heat of the battle, the monster grabs her, squeezing her head in a crushing grip. Despite the pain, Jin manages to drive a small piece of wood into the creature's chest. Both are severely wounded, but the monster continues to pursue her to the shore. Jin stops, ready to fight to the death, but the monster, exhausted, collapses. Seizing her chance, Jin delivers the final blow, killing the beast and decapitating its body. As dawn breaks, Jin, battered and limping, makes her way to the raft, carrying the monster's head as proof of her harrowing ordeal. The island, now ablaze, serves as a beacon of her survival, signaling to anyone nearby that help is needed.